The man you slept with. It wasn't my husband. It was Prince Chukwudi, the heir to the kingdom ruled by Uchenna's uncle. Chidima's eyes widened in shock as the realization of what had transpired hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened and her voice trembled. What have I done? Chidima and Chiamaka were born on a warm, moonlit night in a small Igbo village. They were identical twins, and their arrival brought great joy to their parents, Chief Nnamdi and Nneka, who had prayed for children for many years. Nnamdi, a wealthy man in the village, was well respected, and the birth of his twin daughters only elevated his status further. But that joy was short-lived. The very next morning, the village Dibia came to their home with a grave message warning Nnamdi and Nneka that the spirits had revealed a terrible secret to him. He said that one of the twins was destined to bring shame and destruction to the family and the entire village, but the spirits did not reveal which of the girls would bring this curse. The uncertainty was like a heavy cloud hanging over the family. Fear gripped Nnamdi and Nneka's heart as they listened to the prophecy. They loved their newborn daughters, but the thought of one of them being the cause of their downfall was terrifying. Unable to kill their own child, after so many years of waiting, they made a painful decision. The child who would bring disgrace, whoever she might be, would not be raised as a true daughter. They decided that Chidima, the one who was born second, would most likely be the cursed one, and so she would be stripped of her identity. Instead of growing up as a beloved daughter, she would be treated as a mere servant in her own home, hidden away from the eyes of the village and her own sister. In this way, they hoped to appease the spirits and avoid the curse that had been foretold, even if it meant condemning their own flesh and blood to a life of misery. Chidima's life was far from that of her sister, Chiamaka. From the moment she could walk, she was treated as nothing more than a servant in the Okeke household, while Chiamaka was showered with love, dressed in the finest clothes, and taught the ways of a proper Igbo daughter. Chidima was cast aside, forced to earn her meals with hard labor. She wasn't even allowed inside the main house where her sister and parents lived. Instead, Chidima was sent to the outer quarters where she toiled day and night under the watchful eyes of other servants. Her parents, Nnamdi and Nneka, could hardly bear to look at her. The sight of her brought a reminder of the curse that loomed over their family, so they kept her far away, out of sight and out of mind. The other servants, knowing the story of the cursed child, treated her with disdain. They whispered cruel words behind her back, calling her a bad omen. No matter how hard she worked, they never showed her kindness or respect. Chidima, still just a child, grew up without love, without care, and without hope. The only warmth she ever knew came from the sun as she walked in the fields or scrubbed the floors. As years passed, Chidima's heart hardened. She began to despise her own existence, questioning why she had been born at all. She had no friends, no family who cared for her, and no future to look forward to. Her only solace was in the quiet moments when she could steal away and gaze at the sky, wondering if her life would ever change. But everything shifted the day Chiamaka, now a lively and curious girl, overheard the servants gossiping. They whispered about the girl who lived in the shadows, who walked like a common slave, and who was in fact her twin sister. Shocked and confused, Chiamaka couldn't believe what she heard. How could she have a sister she never knew? Determined to uncover the truth, Chiamaka slipped away from the main house and followed the whispers. She made her way to the outer quarters, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. When she finally found Chidima, she saw a girl who looked just like her, yet was dressed in rags. Her hand was rough from endless work, and her eyes filled with sadness and anger. Chiamaka stood frozen, unable to speak as the reality of what had been hidden from her all these years began to unfold. Chiamaka stood there, staring at Chidinma, her mind racing with all the things she had just learned. Gathering her courage, she approached her twin. "You must be my sister. I am happy to finally meet you," Chiamaka said with a warm smile, trying to mask the shock she felt inside. Chidinma looked at her, unsure how to respond. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, like a ghost in her own home, and now here was her sister, someone she had always knew about but never truly met, standing in front of her, talking to her as if they were equals. It was a feeling she had never expected. Chiamaka, determined to get to know her sister, began sneaking away from the main house whenever she could. She would slip out of the room at night or during the afternoon, pretending to take a nap, only to find her way to the outer quarters where Chidinma worked. At first, Chidinma was wary, not knowing if this was some kind of trick, but Chiamaka's kindness slowly broke down her walls. They would sit together, hidden away from the prying eyes of the other servants. Chiamaka would tell stories about her day, the lessons she was learning, and the silly things that happened in the main house. Chidinma would listen intently, though she rarely spoke. But over time, she began to open up, sharing her own stories, her thoughts, and even her dreams she had long buried deep within herself. Chiamaka never looked down on Chidinma. In fact, she began to admire her sister's strength. She would sneak extra food from the kitchen, slipping it to Chidinma so she wouldn't go hungry. The two of them grew close, sharing secrets and laughter that echoed softly through the quiet nights. But their newfound bond was tested when misfortune struck. One day, Chiamaka, full of excitement and wanting to do something fun with her sister, convinced Chidinma to join her in climbing one of the tall trees at the edge of the village. Chidinma knew deep down that she should refuse. Climbing tree wasn't things she's supposed to do with a princess, especially when she had so much work waiting for her. But the joy in Chiamaka's eyes and the thought of spending more time with her sister made her agree. As they climbed higher and higher, the thrill of being together, away from everyone's expectations, made them both happy. But then, as they reached near the top, Chiamaka's foot slipped. She lost her grip on the branch and screamed as she began to fall. Panic shot through Chidinma, and without thinking, she lunged after her sister, catching her just as she was about to hit the ground. The force of the fall was too much. Chidinma's head struck a rock as they both tumbled down, and everything went blank. The last thing she remembered was the sound of Chiamaka's voice screaming her name before the darkness swallowed her whole. When Chidinma slowly drifted back to consciousness, she found herself lying on a mat in a small, dimly lit hut. Her head throbbed with pain, and everything around her felt like it was shrouded in darkness. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy and her mind was filled with confusion. Before she could gather her thoughts, Chiamaka burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry, Chidinma, I am sorry," she cried, her voice shaking with guilt. She held her sister's hand tightly as if afraid to let go. Chidinma, still disoriented, tried to comfort her sister. "It's okay, Chiamaka, I am all right," she whispered, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The pain in her head was overwhelming, and a deep sense of dread began to creep in. Her heart pounded as the door burst open, revealing their parents, Nnamdi and Nneka. Their face twisted with fury and fear. They stormed in after Chiamaka, their voices trembling with rage. "What have you done, Chiamaka?" Nneka's voice cut through the air like a whip, sharp and unforgiving. Chidinma struggled to make sense of the chaos. She could hear everything, their voices, the shuffling of feet, but something was terribly wrong. Chiamaka, who is with you? Chidinma asked, her voice shaking. I can't see anything. It's too dark. She strained her eyes desperately, trying to pierce the darkness, but it wouldn't lift. Panic began to rise in her chest as she realized the horrifying truth. She had lost her sight. The room fell into a heavy silence, thick with tension, as if everyone held their breath. Chidinma could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, and then the reality struck her like a blow. She was blind. Get away from her now, Nnamdi's voice roared, filled with dread. Chiamaka hesitated, but they grabbed her, yanking her out of the room with desperate force. Chidinma truly is a witch, cursed to bring nothing but destruction. Nnamdi continued, his voice trembling. Thank God the curse fell on her and not you. You must never go near her again. Their words echoed in the small hut as Chidinma crumbled to the floor, tears streaming down her face. The days that followed were filled with sorrow and despair. Chidinma was plunged into a darkness she could no longer see. The world she had once resented had now turned into something even more terrifying. The sadness she felt was like a weight that crushed her spirit. Chiamaka couldn't stay away from Chidinma even after the accident that had changed their lives. Despite the tension in the household, she continued to visit her sister. Life moved on, and when the twins turned 20, Chiamaka married Prince Uchenna, a handsome and wealthy man from the neighboring village. For 3 long years, Chidinma hadn't heard a word from her sister. Chiamaka was now royalty, living in a grand palace, while Chidinma was left behind in darkness, forgotten by the world. Chiamaka's life seemed perfect, but all was not well. She was unable to conceive a child, a secret that weighed heavily on her. The royal healers diagnosed her with a condition that made it difficult for her to become pregnant. Despite this, Prince Uchenna adored his wife. He assured her that her inability to bear children doesn't matter to him, and he refused to listen to the murmurs of his family. They wanted an heir, someone to continue the royal bloodline, and they saw no use for a queen who couldn't provide one. The whispers grew louder, the pressure mounting, but Uchenna remained steadfast in his love for Chiamaka. Chiamaka, however, couldn't ignore the looks of pity and judgment. She heard the whispers in the palace corridors, the quiet conversations that stopped whenever she entered her room. She knew Uchenna would never abandon her, but the fear of losing everything consumed her. Desperate to find a solution, Chiamaka devised a plan that filled her with guilt, but seemed to be the only way to save her marriage. She sent a trusted servant to find Chidinma. The maid was given strict instructions not to reveal too much, just bring her sister to the palace immediately. Chidinma, confused but curious, agreed to go. She had no idea why her sister was calling for her after so many years, but she hoped it meant Chiamaka still cared. The maid led Chidinma through the palace corridors until they reached Chiamaka's private chambers. As soon as Chiamaka saw her sister, she rushed forward and embraced her tightly. Chidinma, I am so sorry to call you here like this, she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. It's about my husband. Chidinma pulled back slightly with concern. What's wrong, Chiamaka? Chiamaka's eyes filled with tears as she began to explain. As a wife, I have failed Uchenna, she whispered, her voice cracking. The royal healers said I have a condition that makes it almost impossible for me to conceive a child. I am barren, Chidinma. I cannot give my husband the heir he needs. Chidinma's heart sank as she listened. What do you mean? Chiamaka wiped her tears and took a deep breath. Uchenna loves me deeply, and I love him too. but I can see the sadness in his eyes, the unspoken desire for a child. His family, they talk behind my back, urging him to take another wife who can give him what I cannot. Chidima's eyes widened as she began to understand what her sister was saying. But Chiamaka, what does this have to do with me? Chiamaka's voice trembled as she spoke, her plea with desperation. Chidima, I am asking you to do something that no sister should have to ask. I need you to sleep with my husband. I need you to give him the air that I cannot give him. Please, Chidima, do this for me, for us. Chidima felt the room spin around her as she processed her sister's words. The request was unthinkable, but the pain in Chiamaka's voice was undeniable. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, leaving her torn between loyalty to her sister and the moral conflict that raged within her. Chidima, I know this is a terrible thing to ask of you, Chiamaka pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. But please, help me save my marriage. I have no other choice. Chidima's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, but the sorrow in Chiamaka's voice made it impossible for her to refuse. Okay, I will help you, Chiamaka, she whispered, though her voice wavered with uncertainty. But will Uchenna agree to this? Chiamaka shook her head. He won't know. Chidima, we will disguise you as me. But Chiamaka, won't Obinna recognize that I am not you? We may look alike, but surely he will know the difference. It will happen at night, so the room will be dark. He won't recognize you, Chiamaka assured her. He's been away for a while, attending to urgent matters in the neighboring village. He will return tonight. My maid will help to prepare you. Chidima's mind raced as she considered the risk. The consequences of being caught as an impostor could be fatal. Thought alone made her stomach churn. Chiamaka's soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. Are you afraid? The question caught Chidima off guard. She forced a bitter smile, trying to mask her fear. You don't need to worry, Chiamaka continued, her voice a mix of hope and desperation. Uchenna will not know I am not the one. But Chidima, you must remain silent. Your voice is deeper than mine, and if he hears it, he will know. Just make sounds if you must, but don't speak. He will kill you if he discovers you are not me. Chidima swallowed hard. Fear tightened its grip on her, but the thought of helping her sister outweighed her own terror. She nodded, determination setting on her face. I will do it, she said quietly, though her heart was pounding. Thank you, Chiamaka said as she embraced her sister tightly. The maid carefully prepared Chidima, using Chiamaka's creams and perfumes to ensure she smelled exactly like her sister. Chidima didn't mention that she was still a virgin. She didn't want to bother Chiamaka with that knowledge. She was determined to help her sister no matter what it took. After being cleaned up and dressed in Chiamaka's clothes, the maid led her to Uchenna's chambers. The maid left her in the room. It took a while before Uchenna came into the room. She quickly composed herself, though her heart raced in her chest. Uchenna moved slowly, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Chiamaka, is that you? He whispered. Chidima kept quiet. He pulled off his clothes and went to take a bath, leaving Chidima trembling with fear. When he returned, he sat beside her on the bed. How have you been, Chiamaka? His voice filled with affection. Chidima's mind raced as she tried to think of how to avoid speaking. She remained silent even when he tried to lift her into his arms and kissed her. Everything happened so quickly after that. He tried to get her to talk, but she only made soft sounds, avoiding any word. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep. The next morning, the door busted open. Chidima quickly sat up, her sister's voice filling the room. Is it morning already? She asked, her body heavy and aching. I did as you asked, Chiamaka, she said softly. Chiamaka's voice was barely above a whisper, filled with regret. Oh, Chidima, I am so sorry. This is all my fault. I should have been more careful. Chidima's heart pounded in her chest. What happened? Did I do something wrong? Fear gripped her as she wondered if she was about to be punished for deceiving the prince. Last night, my husband didn't come home. Chiamaka's voice was trembling. Chidima's entire body went cold. But last night he was here, she said, her voice tumbling out in panic. Everything from the previous night felt too real to have been a dream. Chiamaka shook her head, her face wet with tears. The man you slept with, it wasn't my husband. It was his cousin, Prince Chukwudi. Chidima's eyes widened in shock as the realization of what had transpired hit her like a storm. Her chest tightened and her voice trembled. What have I done? She whispered, feeling the weight of her mistake settling heavy on her shoulders. Panic flared in her eyes as she turned to Chiamaka, searching for some reassurance, but all she found was the same fear mirrored back at her. Does he know? Chiamaka's voice was barely audible, her heart racing at the thought of the repercussions. Chidima shook her head, her tears flowing freely. I don't think so, she said, her voice thick with worry. The guards mentioned that he left early before dawn. He left a message for me, saying that Uchenna will be back in 5 days, and there were some preparations he wanted us to make, but there was nothing else, no sign that he knew. Chiamaka let out a shaky breath, trying to process the situation. You know I stood in for you, she whispered, her voice laced with anxiety. Won't he say anything to your husband? Also, what if he realizes it wasn't you? She asked, her voice edged with desperation. Chidima's expression hardened as she wiped away her tears. No, Chukwudi may be a lot of things, but he is not foolish enough to risk causing trouble with my husband by revealing what happened. We just need to correct these mistakes. You will still have to sleep with Uchenna. A heavy silence hung between them as Chidima sat down, burying her face in her hands. Why does everything always go wrong for me? She muttered bitterly. The realization that she had lost her innocence to a man she barely knew, a man who wasn't even her sister's husband, glowed at her inside. She felt tainted, as if a shadow had settled over her heart that she couldn't shake off. Chidima was also worried about something deeper, something she couldn't quite name. There was a question on the tip of her tongue, one that she dared not ask. The way Chukwudi had called out her sister's name while they were together the night before, it hadn't sounded like a man meeting a woman for the first time. It had been too familiar, too intimate. What could be between Chiamaka and Chukwudi that she wasn't revealing? Join us in the second part to uncover the shocking secrets Chiamaka is hiding. What dark truths lie behind her connection with Prince Chukwudi? Are there any more secrets? The answers are closer than you think, but they might change everything. Don't miss the next episode where the real story begins to unravel. Did you enjoy our story? If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, drop a comment below, and of course, hit that subscribe button. And while you are at it, click the notification bell so you never miss an adventure. Thanks for watching and see you in the next day.